Some nights are like any other, calm, predictable, slipping by unnoticed in the routine of life. But then, there are nights that fracture everything, moments that change the way you see the world forever. That night was one of them, though I never saw it coming. It started with something small, something so insignificant that I almost ignored it. A knock at my bedroom door, soft, hesitant, almost uncertain. My stepfather had never knocked on my door at this hour before, never stood in the dim glow of the hallway light, his shadow stretching long across my floor like a warning of something I wasn't ready to hear. I frowned, glancing at the clock. It was late. Too late for this to be anything casual. "Yeah?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, the eerie stillness of the house making it feel like anything louder would shatter something fragile. The door opened just enough for me to see his face, the deep lines of his expression creased with something that looked dangerously close to concern. Maybe even fear. "Are you awake?" His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight beneath it, the careful control of a man who wasn't used to asking for anything. I sat up a little straighter. "Yeah. What's wrong?" He hesitated, and that single moment of hesitation sent a slow, creeping unease curling through my chest. My stepfather was not the type of man who hesitated. He was always sure, always firm in his decisions. But tonight, he looked uncertain. Finally, he exhaled and stepped inside, closing the door behind him but not moving any closer. "I need your help." The words hit like a jolt of static in the air. I blinked. "What?" "I need your help," he repeated, slower this time, like he was tasting the words, as if even he wasn't sure how they felt coming out of his mouth. A heavy pause settled between us. I didn't know what I expected him to say, but it wasn't that. My stepfather was the kind of man who handled things on his own. He didn't ask for help. Ever. And the fact that he was standing here now, in the middle of the night, saying those words to me, it meant something was wrong. Very wrong. I pushed my blanket aside and sat on the edge of my bed, my heartbeat picking up slightly. With what? For the first time, his eyes flickered with something unreadable, something I couldn't quite place. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, holding it out to me. "Read this." I hesitated for only a second before taking it from him, unfolding it carefully. The second I saw the first few words, my breath caught in my throat. "You think you can outrun the past, but you can't. We know where you are. You have one chance to make this right." A chill ran down my spine. I looked up at him, my fingers tightening around the paper. "What is this?" His expression darkened. A warning. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, pressing in around me, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. I swallowed. "Who sent this?" He ran a hand over his jaw, the muscle ticking slightly. "Someone I used to know. Someone I thought I left behind." My stomach twisted. "And now they've found you." He nodded once. "And they won't stop until they get what they want." A cold dread settled in my chest. "Which is?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw it real, unfiltered fear. "Me." I sucked in a shaky breath, my mind racing. "And if you don't give yourself up?" His jaw tightened. "Then they come for the people I care about." The weight of his words crashed over me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't just his past. It was mine now, too. I gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in my hands. What do we do? His silence was answer enough. We were out of time. And whatever happened next, it was only the beginning. The rest of the night passed in a blur of whispered conversations, of hurried packing, of a growing sense of unease that settled deep in my bones and refused to let go. My stepfather was on edge, his movements quick and deliberate, his gaze flickering toward the windows every few minutes as if expecting something, or someone, to appear from the shadows. I barely spoke, barely breathed, my mind spinning in endless circles, trying to make sense of it all. How had we ended up here? How had he managed to keep this secret for so long? And, more importantly, how had it caught up to us now? Every question led to more uncertainty, more doubt, more fear. By the time we reached the front door, the duffel bag slung over his shoulder and my pulse pounding in my ears, I realized the truth of our situation. We weren't running toward safety. We were running from something much worse, and I wasn't sure we would ever stop. The weight of the night pressed down on me as I followed my stepfather out of the house, the cold air wrapping around us like an omen of something darker, something inevitable. My heart pounded in my chest, my fingers gripping the strap of my bag so tightly that my knuckles ached, but I didn't loosen my hold. The reality of our situation had settled in completely, pushing away the remnants of the life I had known just hours ago, leaving behind only a single, undeniable truth: we were running. And we might never stop. My stepfather moved with purpose, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the darkness as if expecting something or someone to emerge at any moment. The letter he had shown me still burned in my mind, the words carved into my memory like a brand, a warning that refused to fade no matter how much I wished it would. You think you can outrun the past, but you can't. I had no idea what he had done, no idea who these people were or why they had suddenly resurfaced after all this time, but I knew one thing for certain: he was afraid. And that alone terrified me more than anything else. As we reached the car, he opened the door for me, his movements quick but controlled. "Get in," he said, his voice low, clipped, as if every second we spent standing outside was a risk. I hesitated for only a moment before sliding inside, the leather seat cold against my skin, my pulse still hammering as I tried to process everything that had happened in the span of just a few hours. The house, the one I had grown up in, the one that had always felt safe, stood behind us like a ghost, its windows dark, its walls now just a relic of a life I no longer had the luxury of clinging to. My stepfather got in beside me, shutting the door with a quiet finality that sent another wave of unease crawling up my spine. The engine rumbled to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness as he pulled away from the curb, his grip firm on the wheel, his knuckles pale. We drove in silence for a long time, the road stretching endlessly ahead of us, the weight of what we were leaving behind pressing heavier with every passing mile. I wanted to ask where we were going, what the plan was, but the words caught in my throat, swallowed by the overwhelming sense that nothing I could say would make a difference. Whatever came next was already set in motion. We were just along for the ride. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Are we ever going back?" My voice was quiet, but it still felt too loud in the suffocating silence of the car. My stepfather didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his expression unreadable. "Not if I can help it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So that's it? We just disappear? It's the only way." There was no hesitation in his voice, no room for argument. "They found us once. If we stay, they'll find us again." I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening in my lap. "What did you do?" He exhaled sharply, his grip flexing on the wheel. "I made a mistake. A long time ago. And now we're paying for it." A bitter taste filled my mouth. "We? I didn't do anything. I didn't ask for this." For the first time, he glanced at me, his expression softening just slightly. "I know, and I'm sorry, but you're part of this now, whether you like it or not." The weight of his words settled in my chest like a stone. I turned my gaze back to the window, watching the trees blur past in the darkness, wondering if this was how it was always meant to be, if this was the price of knowing the truth. We drove for what felt like hours, the silence stretching longer, heavier, until finally, the car slowed, turning down a narrow road lined with thick, looming trees. My stomach twisted as we pulled up to a small, rundown motel, the flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow against the cracked pavement. My stepfather killed the engine, his hands lingering on the wheel for just a second before he turned to me. "We stay here tonight. In the morning, we keep moving." I nodded numbly, following him out of the car, my legs stiff from sitting too long, my body aching with exhaustion I wasn't sure I would ever shake. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and gasoline, the distant hum of traffic the only sound breaking the quiet. My stepfather led the way to the office, his posture tense, his shoulders squared, like he was preparing for a fight that hadn't come yet but was inevitable. I stayed close behind, my heart hammering as he checked us in under false names, his voice calm, practiced, like he had done this before. And maybe he had. Maybe I didn't know him at all. The room was small, barely furnished, the walls stained with years of cigarette smoke, the air stale and heavy. I dropped my bag on the chair near the door, the realization settling in fully now. We weren't going home. We weren't going anywhere familiar. This was our life now. A life of running, of looking over our shoulders, of waiting for the past to catch up with us. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the blanket as I stared at the floor. How long do you think we'll have to do this? My stepfather sat down across from me, his expression unreadable. As long as it takes. A cold chill ran through me. And if they find us again? His jaw tightened. Then we run again. I looked at him, searching for something, reassurance, certainty, anything to tell me this wasn't as hopeless as it felt. But all I saw was a man who had already accepted the inevitable, a man who knew there was no escaping this, not really. And deep down, I knew he was right. There was no going back. No undoing what had already been done. This was our life now, and there was no telling how it would end. I lay down, my body aching with exhaustion, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. Because for the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to truly be afraid. And I knew, without a doubt, that the worst was still ahead of us.